Hi, everyone. Welcome to another great session here at the 8th Annual UAGC ECE Conference. Your session that you've chosen today is Professional and Personal Safety in the Workplace. Dr. Shelli Henehan is here with us from the University of Arkansas Fort Smith School of Education. She's the Professor and Director of Early Childhood Education. We also have Ronnette Haynes here with us. She is at the University of Arkansas Fort Smith. She's an Advisor and Coaching Outreach Coordinator for Early Childhood Education. And let me give them a proper introduction really quick. Dr. Henehan has been in the early childhood education field for over 25 years, is a state licensed preschool through sixth grade teacher, and has taught in higher education since 2005. She has written grants that have funded the writing of state-approved early childhood curricula and professional development modules for early childhood educators. Ms. Haynes has degrees in early childhood education, communication, and teaching English to speakers of other languages. She is a national board certified preschool fourth grade teacher, currently teaching in higher education. And these ladies are amazing. I know them personally, so I'm so glad you chose this session.
Thank you, Dr. Shipley.
All right, so on this slide, we request your attention for a brief moment in the spirit of transparency and utmost respect for our community. We have some information we'd like you to read, and by taking a few moments to read through this disclaimer, you empower yourself with important information regarding the boundaries of our knowledge-sharing environment. All right, also on this screen, if you'll take just a moment to read, then together we will embark upon some exciting topics in early childhood education. And Dr. Henehan and Ms. Hayes, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shipley. Okay, so now you know who we are. And so we want to reflect a minute on who is in our audience. So what we are expecting, we're thinking that some of you may be directors or administrators of early childhood programs in your state or in your community. You may be teachers or caregivers of infants, toddlers, or preschoolers. You may be a family home child provider. I mean, that's gotten to be a very popular scenario in our state, which is Arkansas. And then possibly you're a trainer. Are you a trainer of professional development? We welcome you to this as well. And you may have another role to play in early childhood education. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is keeping yourself professionally and personally safe in the workplace. And it does begin when you very first apply for a position in an early care and education program. When you submit a job application, I want you to think about your social media profile and post. And I want you to ask yourself this question. Is there anything there that you would rather a prospective employee not read? Now, what I tell my students is I say, look at your social media and ask yourself the question, is there something there I wouldn't want my grandmother to read? And if your grandmother would be offended, I can promise you an employer would be. So did you know that anywhere from 60 to 90% of employers check the social media profile and post of a job applicant before hiring? Although we couldn't find a specific percentage of early care and education employers who do this type of checking, we can assume that some do. So again, ask yourself that question. Is there anything that you would rather a prospective employer not read? So with that in mind, Ronnette, can you tell us how social media can actually help us get a job?
Certainly. So you need to have a professional online presence that includes your education and training specific to the job. Make sure it's updated. Make sure that you add things from the past as well as your present, and not just where you've worked, but all those skills that you have that maybe you haven't thought deeply about, but make sure you're including the skills that you're good at. Also, professional organizations to which you belong. I know locally we have the River Valley Early Childhood Association. We also have the Arkansas Early Childhood Association, as well as NACCE and all those organizations that you can be a part of. Make sure that that professionalism shows up on your social media through listings of your professional organizations. Also, your employment history that supports statements that you've made in your resume. If you have put things on your resume, make sure that a potential employer, if they get on your social media, that they can verify that those are facts, that it truly did happen. It's just another way of showing them that yes, you were there and you did actually do that.
All right. Thank you, Ronnette. Well, social media can also work against you, unfortunately. So let's talk about some of those ways. All right. Do you have pictures or videos that show you behaving in an offensive, reckless, or immature way? You need to know your audience. If you're living in a small community that's very conservative, you need to make sure that you're not posting even pictures of yourself having a glass of wine. I mean, you just have to know where you live and who you're dealing with. What about, do you have an immature, silly, or offensive screen name? So I actually looked some of these up to give you an example. There's a real screen name called Harry Poppins. Well, that is kind of funny, kind of cute, but not professional. So make sure that you don't have a silly screen name. Another one here was uh, Google underscore was my idea. Okay, whatever. So don't do that. Make sure you have a professional screen name. What about the language that you're using on social media? Do not use discriminatory or profane language. Not professional. What about comments that you make? If you make comments that indicate the information in your resume may not be true, that not only could that prevent you from getting a job, it could also get you fired from your current one. And then what about confidential information? Do not share any of this about your current or past employer on your social media. And then lastly, confidential information about a child in your care or that child's family, again, that is a fireable offense. So not only will you not get a job, you could lose the one that you have. So mainly, I want you to think before you post. So let's move from the job application to the job interview. Those of you in the audience will have an opportunity to observe a role-playing scene between a job applicant, which is going to be played by my lovely assistant, Ronnette Haynes, and she's going to be applying for a position as a caregiver in the infant classroom of the Anything Goes child care program. And then I'm going to play the part of the director of the program. Your job is to take notes and record anything you observe during the interview that raises a red flag and be able to explain why. All right? So here we go. Ready, Ronnette? She's got that.
I'm ready.
Gum. She's ready. She's got her chewing gum in. Okay. I see on your job application that you were employed at Little Kiddo's Wild Child Daycare Center for the past 3 months, and Smarty Pants Boys and Girls Academy for 3 months before that. Well, I know both of those directors really well, and I know they wouldn't have hired you if you weren't a good worker. So I probably won't bother to call them for a reference check. Now let me look at your education. You say that you are in the process of obtaining your GED. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been working on that that thing for about 2 years. Oh, you said GED? Is that the same thing?
Yes, I'm afraid it is.
Oh, okay. JED. Yeah, I've been working on that JED thing for about 2 years. Something always happens and I never get to finish it. I really, really do hope to get to someday because I know how important education is. Am I right?
Well, yes, you are right. Education is very important. And I know what you mean about things always happening before you can finish. I've been working on a plan for orientation for new staff, but I still haven't finished it. But if you've worked in childcare before, you already know what to do, so you probably won't need staff orientation anyway. Your application's fine. When can you start?
When can I start? Well, let's see. I don't have childcare right now. So if you have room for my 2 kids, one is 2 years old and the other's almost 5. They were in the two centers that I previously worked at before. They didn't give them any trouble at all. And if they did, I just told their teacher, I said, you just give them a good paddling. That's all they need. And it always seems to work.
Okay, so you can work, you can start tomorrow then?
Sure, tomorrow.
Okay,
Let's
great.
say,
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you can start tomorrow because I really need you in that infant room. There were 2 teachers in there, but one left about 2 weeks ago, and the other teacher has been about to lose her mind trying to take care of those 10 screaming kids all by herself.
oh,
And
I know.
yes, just bring your kids with you.
Okay, I know how it is, and I will be there at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning if I can get my car to start. It was
Okay.
sure nice meeting you.
Well, if you bring your kids with you, it will put us a little over ratio, but that's okay because I really need someone in that infant room, or I might have to go in there myself.
Oh, oh. Well, it was nice meeting you. I'm going to get my phone now. It was nice meeting you. I'll see you at
Very
9
nice. I'll see you
a.m.
tomorrow.
Hello. Oh, yes. Yes. Well, I think it probably would have been okay if I had just gone ahead and put on the application that I also worked at that children's center for, almost a month. But they kept complaining about my absences and they wanted to see a copy of my JED. Oh, she said it's GED, not my JED. I got to remember that. But I told them that I had it, but I just don't quite have it yet. And they scheduled me for some training on positive discipline, which I didn't really think I needed. I mean, how much more positive than can you get than me? I'm such a positive person. They also expected like me to report directly to the hotline if I suspected maltreatment. But on my other jobs, they've always told me just to talk to the director and they would take care of it. I didn't have to report to no maltreatment hotline. I just thought that was too much to expect of a child care worker. So, that one day I just got tired of it. I left on my lunch break and I never went back. Uh-huh.
And
Yep.
scene.
You cut me off.
I did. I cut you off there, girl. Okay. So clearly, there were some red flags in this interview process, correct? All right.
Absolutely.
So let's look at some of the red flag observations that hopefully you all made as we were going through this hot mess of an interview. First off, the applicant falsified application by not putting down all the places of her employment for the last 6 years. Remember, she was kind of feeling bad about not reporting that last center, but she had left after her lunch break and never went back. Also, the director failed to check references, which may have told her that this was not a reliable child care provider. We know that minimum licensing requirements, they require you to have a GED, not a JED, but a GED or a high school diploma even to be hired. So that should have been done prior to being hired. And then also the director noted that she had been over the staff child ratio in the infant room. She had one caregiver to 10 infants. So many red flags. So
Absolutely.
Ronnette, would you please continue some of the other red flag observations?
I will. Another thing that I noticed is that she mentioned that there was no staff orientation. And staff orientation is so important because it includes the facility management policies. It includes the minimum licensing requirements of whatever state you live in. It includes center schedules and emergency procedures. Another thing that I noticed was that there was no paperwork on the applicant's children. It was just like, yeah, just bring them tomorrow. There was no other paperwork. And just the paddling, that alone, the inappropriate discipline that she seemed to be okay with, that was an issue as well. And I think one of the biggest red flags is the mandated reporter training. She definitely needed to have some of that and know that she was personally responsible to be a mandated reporter, not reporting to her director.
All right, then. So now let's talk about some preventative measures that can support safety for you and others. Taking these from the minimum licensing requirements for child care centers. Now, first of all, the applicant must complete the job application thoroughly and honestly. Secondly, the director must document that contact has been made to obtain employment-related information for the previous 6 years. The applicant receives basic orientation on facility management policies prior to ever providing direct care. The applicant must review the minimum licensing requirements for their state, the center schedules for the center in which she's hoping to get hired, and the emergency procedures before ever providing direct care. All of these things must happen before they are ever with children. The applicant must go through the mandated reporter training. They are mandated to report under the Child Maltreatment Act. And then lastly, the staff-child ratio must be maintained at all times.
So all of those that you mentioned are great, and it's things that we need to remember. Unfortunately, there are a lot of unsafe practices that we've seen out there and that you should avoid. For one thing, children are unable to see you at all times. If children can't see you at all times, there are a lot of issues that might come up. And also the room is very dark at rest time. Children might be frightened. They might cut their hair. They might cut their clothing. I don't know where they find the scissors, but trust me, they will find them if they're out there. And then why, I don't know, but they tend to like to stick things up their nose. So that tiny little bead that dropped on the floor, however many days ago, somehow they will find it and they will stick it up their nose or in their mouth. So children, you need to be able to see children at all times, and the room does not need to be very dark at rest time so that you have a good visibility. Another roadblock or unsafe practice is when you put yourself in an isolated situation with a child. One example of that is possibly going to the bathroom with the child and closing the door. That's never a good idea. Always having that door cracked or having someone nearby is a good thing. It protects you for sure. Also, sometimes we sit or stand in the back or with our backs to the children in a classroom or on the playground. Specifically, sometimes people talk. They want to visit. We can't talk. We're not there to talk. We're not there to visit. We're there to watch children. And that means you need to always have yourself in a lifeguard situation to where your eyes are always on the children. You're constantly scanning that classroom, constantly scanning that playground. And then during rest time, rest time is not the teacher's rest time. That rest time is for the child. The teacher does not need to be reading a book, does not need to be paying bills or snoozing, taking a rest. They don't need to be working on school work if they're a student. And, we've actually had people tell us that sometimes they'll take an online training during rest time. No, that means your time, your eyes are not focused on the child. Your attention's not on the child, and therefore lots of things could happen. So we need to always be checking on our children. Failure to check on children during rest time is an accident waiting to happen. It's definitely an unsafe practice.
All right. So let's talk about written documentation for your personal and for the child's safety. You must report all accident and incident reports. If a visual check of a child shows a bruise that a child had when he came into your care, it's always wise to document that so they will know that the child had that before the child was in your care. Also, if you observe a coworker who is using unacceptable guidance procedures that does result in a bruise of some kind, you need to document that as well. And if a child is, you need to make sure that a child is signed in and out of the facility by a family member or an authorized person, not by you, the teacher. All of these things are for your safety, but also the safety of the child. Now, the things that Ronnette and I have been sharing with you, we actually got some of these from a respected licensing specialist who is now retired. And she affirmed that all of the things that we've listed have been observed by one or more of the specialists that she knows. Now, let's look at what minimum licensing recommends for documentation and for child guidance. So this is behavior guidance requirements as stated by the Arkansas minimum licensing requirements. It said the following activities or threats of such activities are unacceptable behavior guidance measures and shall not be used for children. These include, but are not limited to, the following. So I'm just going to tell you what they are. You are not to use restraints. Restraining a child briefly by holding the child is allowed when the child's actions place the child or others at risk of injury, but we do not restrain a child otherwise. We do not wash children's mouths out with soap. We don't tape or obstruct a child's mouth. We don't place unpleasant or painful tasting substances in a mouth, on lips, etc. Tabasco sauce and other things that I've known in the past have been used on children. We do not do that, and that is against minimum licensing. We do not curse at children. We don't use profane or abusive language. We don't isolate a child without supervision. We don't place a child in a dark area. We don't inflict physical pain on a child, hitting, pinching, pulling hair, slapping, kicking, twisting arms, biting or biting a child back, spatting, swatting, etc. None of these are acceptable. We don't yell at children, but this does not include if we raise our voice to get the child's attention for their own safety. Forcing physical activity such as running laps, or doing push-ups, etc., are not acceptable as punishment. However, this does not include a group PE activity that's not punitive in nature. You should never associate punishment with rest, punishing a child for not lying down. You don't punish a child for failing at toilet training or for having an illness, not making it to the toilet to vomit. We don't punish children for any of these things. We do not ever deny food, lunch, or snacks as punishing children for not eating. We do not force a child. We don't bribe a child to eat, and we certainly don't force them to eat. We don't shame, humiliate, frighten, label, physically or mentally harm children. We do, those are all forbidden. And then lastly, minimum licensing requires that we do not cover the faces of children with blankets or similar items. Now, let me ask you, Ronnette.
Yes.
Move on to for our next piece. Have you ever been asked to babysit by parents of a child in your care?
I have, and we're going to discuss that in just a moment. Can we go back just a little bit onto
Oh, I'm so
6 and
sorry.
7?
I am so sorry. I missed a whole bunch of others.
That's okay.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk more about the minimum licensing. I thought I had covered it all, but I had not.
You're close.
To continue, we do not post group behavior charts. Those group behavior charts were very popular in the past. That is now against minimum licensing in Arkansas. Individual behavior charts that are not viewable by children and individual charts used by therapists are allowable. And behavior guidance practices used by the center shall be discussed with each child's parents and provided to them in writing at the time of enrollment with a copy signed by the parent maintained in the child's record. And we have to remember our babies, our infants and toddlers. So for providing guidance for infants and toddlers, you may not put a child in timeout if the child is under 2. And the child may be placed in a supervised area away from the group or in a crib or playpen while staff attends to the children, to the situation. Brief separation from the group is acceptable when the child's behavior places the child or others at risk of harm. Example, a child who has bitten another child would be removed from the group briefly while staff attends to the bitten child. All right, Ronnette, have you ever been asked to babysit by parents of a
Actually,
child in your care?
I have. I have been asked to babysit, as many of our child care workers have. And there's many reasons why parents ask child care workers to babysit for them. They know that they have a relationship with the child. They know you have experience working with children and that you have a lot of knowledge when it comes to children. And they just feel like you're going to do a really good job. But there are a lot of possible dangers of babysitting for families. First and foremost, the employee and parent handbook may have a policy prohibiting it. So you always want to know what your policies are in your handbooks at the facility that you work at. The parents sometimes may constantly ask you to babysit. They tend to just get used to it, and sometimes if it's supposed to be a one-time thing because they're in a bind, sometimes it ends up being a permanent situation, and you're actually with their child more than they are. So parents may also have difficulty separating between your daytime job and your babysitting for them. So the demeanor of the parent may change. Their expectations for you at work may change. And sometimes it kind of makes it an awkward situation. Another thing is, we have drop off and pick up, and we like for those to go smoothly. But sometimes those parents want to make babysitting arrangements while dropping off and picking up their child. That just holds up the entire line. It frustrates the parents behind them that are trying to get to work. It's just not a good situation to be in. Another reason that babysitting is not always a good thing is because that particular child may have a special bond with you because you spend a lot more time with them. And so that child may expect you to hold and focus on him or her, only him and her or her, to the point that it affects the relationships that you have with the other children, or it affects the relationships between that child and the other children. Maybe it spawns a little bit of jealousy. And finally, you may be tempted to gossip with coworkers about the family. If you babysit for families, you tend to know a little bit more about that family, sometimes a little bit more than what you really want to know. And it's hard to not release that information to your coworkers or your really good friend that you work next to. It's hard not to gossip about it. So obviously, if your employee and parent handbook allows it, then, you can't be stopped from it, but definitely you want to consider safety for yourself and the child and think about what's best for the child and that family as well as yourself before you agree to babysit.
Okay, so that last bullet about gossiping, that leads us into a question about confidentiality. So
Yes.
thank you, Ronnette.
Mhm.
So child care programs routinely handle confidential information about enrolled children, families, and staff. You may find out information about divorces, affairs, illnesses, money problems, drug abuse, legal problems, and other sensitive information. Much of this information, if not all of it, is confidential. To protect the confidentiality of the children, families, and coworkers, and to keep yourself professionally and personally safe, be informed about the laws, the regulations, the licensing requirements, and program policies related to confidentiality. Don't share information with people who don't need it. Give it only to people who need it to make decisions regarding a child, that child's family, or staff. And though it may be tempting, again, like Ronnette said, to talk with a coworker about a child's family, your supervisor, or coworker, this can be considered gossip and could adversely reflect on you professionally and personally. So that last bullet, keep confidential information in a safe place. avoid gossiping. All of these things are very important for keeping yourself and the children in your care safe.
Absolutely. So before we move on to the next part, there's a few questions we want you to ponder. I want you to think, have you ever taken photos or made a video recording of a child in your care? Have you posted those photos or video recordings of children on social media or other websites? Did you have written permission from the child's parent or guardian for either of these actions? How may these actions be unsafe for you and for the child if you took them without written permission? Does your staff and parent policy manual for your program address the issue? And do you know what's stated in your minimum licensing requirements about these actions? So many parents are protective of their children, and they're also that goes over into social media. So I'm very protective of my children, and I'm very protective of my children's photos. And a lot of parents feel that way. So some programs may even not allow you to take pictures or post the pictures. And if you violate those, you could actually lose your job. You could be terminated. But also there's minimum licensing requirements for childcare centers about records and about program requirements about photos. So in the Arkansas minimum licensing requirements for childcare centers, 604 Children's Records states written permission for facility to photograph or videotape their child if applicable, and written permission for the facility to place the photos and video recordings of their child on social media or other websites if applicable. 401 program requirements states that photos or video recordings shall not be made of a child without written permission from the child's parent or guardian. And number 18, photos or video recordings shall not be placed on social media or any other website without prior written parental permission. You need to respect the rights of parents to protect their children. Absolutely no photos or video recordings means just that. Follow minimum license requirements. The words shall not means just that. Think before you photograph, video record, or post. This protects you and the children in your care.
All right. So during this session, we have focused on a variety of strategies to keep yourself professionally and personally safe in your workplace. These strategies are also meant to keep the children safe. So I would like you to look at each of these points that we've covered and think about some takeaways that you may have for each of them. What will you take away from this presentation to help you with that application for employment? What about when you interview for the position? And then finally, functioning in the workplace. All of these things, hopefully we have provided we've had a little fun with it. Hopefully we've provided some strategies that are also very applicable to your current situation.
So we really want you to remember that early childhood educators are professionals, and professionalism is a lifelong process that involves managing ethical responsibilities to children, families, colleagues, employers, and society.
All right, and then here are our references. We did access our state quality rating system, which is called Arkansas Better Beginnings. We reference that a lot. We also reference the Arkansas Child Development Early Learning Standards throughout our presentation, and also the Arkansas Minimum Licensing Requirements, which you heard at multiple points. And we thank you for being with us and hope that you have some other wonderful presentations.
Thank you, everyone. We hope to see you at another session.